The following is from the Agency for Instructional Technology, AIT.
Understanding value helps control the mood and design of a picture. Value in drawing means the lightness or darkness of a color. The dominance of light or dark colors in a drawing or painting determines its value key. In this program, Paul will explain values and also describe how to select value keys.
Value is the most important element in a picture, whether it's a drawing or a painting, because value is what the eye sees. Now, there are no lines in nature. There's only values. We use lines in drawing to separate shapes and values, but as we fill in the values with tones, tints, and shades, the lines tend to disappear. Now let's look at a value scale. This is what we call a value scale. And this could be used for any color. This one happens to be in black and white to show you that every color has one of these steps of values in it. This is a 9-step scale, and there's nothing magic about 9 steps. It could be 12 steps, it could be 15 steps, we could spread them out, and it could be red from a light pink down to a deep red, it could be blue from a light blue down, and so on. Any color will have a value. Every color has to have a value. Now, the human eye can see up to 50 steps in value, and some animals much more. Some birds up to 200 steps in value. If we look at this sketch here, we'll find that this sketch is made up of light values. It's a tan color, but the range 1/2 to 2/3 of the values here would fall up in here, in these two, number 1 and 2. And if you take them over here, you'll find that 1/2 to 2/3, the dominant values here are the color of the paper here, which would be number 1 in this case, and this value here, which would fall about between 1 and 2. 1 and 2 and 3. We need not be exact about these. There's some leeway. We don't need not to get too dogmatic about it, but it's easy to see that the amount of dark in this color is between 1 or 2 of these. In a drawing or a painting, we like to establish a value key. Now, a value key means that 1/2 or to 2/3 of the picture will be dominated by 1 or 2 values. It could be a light value, it could be a middle value, or it can be a low value. But that's the way we balance a picture in values. Balance in art doesn't mean 50-50. We want a dominant value, which will be 1/2 or 2/3. We want a dominant color. We want a dominant object. But it's a form of balance, and it's only a suggestion. There's no laws in this. But this is a suggestion of how to balance the values and establish a value key. Now here, we have what we would call a high key minor. High key means that most of the value here will fall into number 1 or 2 as far as values go. Now, when I say minor, that refers to contrast. That means it's minor contrast. There is not a lot of contrast in this picture, so we call it a high key minor. Now, I can change this from a high key minor. Let's say I change it to a middle key intermediate, which means a little bit of contrast, but not minor contrast and not major contrast. So if I'm going to change this to a middle key, then I'm going to change the value scale to something in here. So I'll have to add darker colors. That doesn't mean you change a picture each time once you establish the value. I'm doing this for demonstration purpose to show you that you can change a value. And value key is important. It dramatizes, it sets a stage for your picture, for whatever you want to interpret. So if I want this to be done in middle key, then I'm going to have to add colors that in value range and on the value scale will be a number, say 5, 6, or 7, which are middle keys on a 9-step scale. Now, if I want a night scene or a snow scene or a storm scene, then I'll go to darker values. So here we have probably middle values. That means that about half of the picture value will fall down in here now. I've lowered the values. And I have to come back and add some darker values to get some definition, but not a lot. There's not a lot of contrast in this picture. So what we have here is now a scale maybe like this, and we've changed, and our value key now has changed to these two, which would fall maybe up in here. We've shifted down the value. This would probably fall here, and maybe this would fall between these two. So we would call this picture now a middle key, middle here, and intermediate in contrast, meaning there's not a lot of contrast. We even could call this even minor in contrast if we wanted to. And we don't hang up on these arguments, but as close as you want to. There's not a lot of contrast. I even could call this minor contrast. And if I darkened it a little more, it'd be intermediate. If I darkened it into black, it would be major. Usually, we don't paint or draw a picture in the middle key, intermediate, or so-so contrast. There may be a time that you want to do that, but usually we don't because it doesn't show up. There's not enough contrast. But now I'll change this into a low-key, high contrast, and it'll probably be a better picture. Now I'm using darker tones here for the trees. I'll do it for the sky. Now you can see the low keys coming in here. That means what I'm using now is down in here. Now the key means, as I've said, that 1/2 to 2/3 of a value dominates. And whatever the 1/2 to 2/3 that dominate on your value scale, we call a key. And if I can put some darker up here. Now we're going into a darker key. And of course, this is for demonstration purposes, so I'll not go into detail. But I'm coming in with darker colors and a lot more contrast. This would be a night scene or and I can contrast not only by dark, but I can contrast it high contrast by adding a moon or a sun. Maybe put some snow here on the roof. But 1/2 to 2/3 still will fall in the lower keys. So we've changed the picture now to a low key and high contrast. So most of it would be made up now of something down in here. This probably is a number near a number 8, and maybe this is a 6 or a 7. Now, why do we select a value key? Because it helps us tell what we want to say artistically. It sets a mood. It dramatizes. If we want an evening scene or a stormy scene, we'll have a low value key. And if we want a light, sunshine, bright day, the dominant values will be up in the tints and not down in the shades. And another thing, it helps give a method to your work. You must make some decisions. And this is one decision we make. We'll decide my value key is going to be high, middle, or low. So we're not looking for accidents to happen then. We have some path or determination to start our picture on. This is a good example of a high key with major to intermediate contrast. This would be a middle key with major contrast. Here's an excellent example of a high key with a minor contrast. Here's a phenomenon of value. A light value, bright value, receding into the distance will darken, but a dark value receding into the distance will lighten. And if they recede far enough, they'll come to about the same value, somewhere around the value 3. Why? Atmosphere, moisture in the air.
Choose a light, middle, or low-key value scale for a drawing. First, make a value scale so you know what value will dominate a major portion of your picture. Draw one using just those values. Draw others with different value keys and contrasts so you have practice working in a range of moods.
This black and white sketch is in a high key. That means most of the value here is falling up here in, say, number 1, 2, and 3. Now I'm going to add color to this, but retain the value. Trying to retain the value, meaning I will not change the key. I'm simply adding color. So when you make small sketches, color roughs, and you have the value the way you want to, when you add color and paint it, try to retain that key that you've already solved.
Value refers to the lightness or darkness in color. The dominant values in a picture are called its value key. For example, a high-key picture primarily has light values or tints. The contrast in a picture refers to its range of values. A picture with extreme values has a high contrast. Value and contrast become important tools for controlling design and mood in your pictures. Drawing with Paul Ringler is produced by the Agency for Instructional Technology in association with the Oklahoma Educational Television Authority.